Greetings, MacNNers. It is time once again for one of my favorite podcasts, maybe yours. Episode 47 of the MacNN Podcast. Welcome back, MacNNers. Always a pleasure to have you with us. My name's Charles Martin. I'm the editor of MacNN, and with me tonight, Friday, January 15th, is managing editor Mike. All right.
It is Friday. I have alcohol and I have opinions.
What could possibly go wrong?
Absolutely nothing. Say it again.
This is, by the way, going to be a super opinionated episode, so you just better lay back and enjoy it, because it's really going to be very opinionated, I promise you. We've got quite a few things to talk about. I want to kick right off with some rumors, man. Later on in the show, by the way, though, we do have the fabulous William Gallagher, my co-author on the book MacNN Pointers, by the way. Have I mentioned it?
Yeah, how's that door modification going?
It's worse. I need to do it again now because, seriously, we went to number 1 on iBooks and then in computers and technology for paid ebooks. What?
Yeah, you don't even see that much. We're actually just number 2 as of recording time, and all week we've been sitting at number 1 and number 2 on the iTunes bookstore for computers and technology. So pretty happy about that, and our Amazon numbers are nice as well.
Yeah. I think we got shot out of the number 1 spot by Bowie's Black Star. So
yeah, okay.
Damn it.
But we're not doing the book to make a ton of money. That's not the point of the book.
Nor will we.
The point of the book is education. The point of the book is education. The point of the book is spreading the gospel, as it were, the gospel of Apple.
As I have pointed out to my local user group, and you have to yours, there's 2 real great things about this book, if I may say so myself. One of them is it's full of really actually useful tips. William and I know this because we both write the column, and I'll read one of his and go, hey, that's great. And he'll read one of mine and go, ooh, I should try that after tea, because he's English. So there are some actual useful tips in there, certainly more than $1 worth. And that's what the book costs. So yeah, pretty good. And then the other thing is that it's a gift to the user group community. We've just talked about user groups. And as we mentioned last week, the book is allowed to be used as the foundation of lesson plans and SIG meetings and all that kind of stuff. All we ask is that you credit us, and that's it. It's actually printed in the book. So
yep, that's it.
Please get out to your local user group. If you've never found one, let me formally invite you to locate your local one and come in for a meeting, because I've traveled around and I've met a number of different user groups, and they are always so much fun. I don't get it. It should be a bunch of sad nerds, and it isn't. It is anything but, in fact. All right, so let's move on to idle speculation and gossip, otherwise known as rumors. So once again, this past week, we had to do a rumor roundup because there's talk and speculation and things and analyst guessing and punditry, as they will. There's 3 we thought pretty good rumors, as rumors go, this week, so we thought we'd take a look at them. The first one that I want to talk about shows off the evolution of a rumor. A couple of weeks ago, we had a rumor about an iPhone 6C. Remember that?
That was before Christmas. They were calling it the 6C.
Yeah, that was before Christmas. It was going to be functionally equivalent to an iPhone 6S, except it would be with the plastic back on it. That was about the main difference. It was using the same chip. It had as much RAM. And apparently somebody at Rumor Central got the memo that this is stupid. A little too unbelievable, probably. Especially when, although it was not, in fact, a failure, the 5C was perceived as kind of a failure.
Well, let's talk about the market position of the 5C when it came out.
Yeah.
The iPhone 5 came out at the same time the 4S was available. Smaller format than the 5. Mm-hmm. So then the 5C came out at the same time the 5S came out.
Right.
So now the 5C has got the same processor as the iPhone 5, and now the 5S is faster.
Right.
So now all of a sudden we think that the 6C is going to have the same processor as the 6S?
Well, as I say, that's all been walked back now.
Yeah, oh yeah, and we predicted that as well.
We did.
We didn't think that the A9 processor made any sense in this model, and it still doesn't.
Neither did 2 gigabytes of RAM. But there is a market for a phone that is, smaller, that has a 4-inch display. We know this because we actually went out and polled. We talked about this last week. We found that market is small, but it exists.
It's small in the United States. It's small in Northern Virginia. We're talking about the polling article that we did last weekend where I squatted in front of an Apple store one Saturday morning with 1,000 of my least closest friends. And we discussed it. And it was a very small percentage of the people polled are looking for a phone in that size factor. But that does not mean that is the case in every market everywhere.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely there could be, particularly if Apple can do something about the price, again, as analysts have said forever, then, there becomes use cases where that becomes viable. And of course, as you say, like gold color is very, very popular in some regions and less so in others.
Well, don't forget, subsidized phone plans are gone.
Yeah. Well, at least in the United States anyway. They're still here in Canada, I have to tell you.
So while that $30 a month looks really great on your AT&T phone bill or whatever, it's scary when you think about this as 2 years. So the subsidies you get to pay that $199 that Apple says that the 6S costs, it's a $500 subsidy.
Yeah.
The 6S is a $700 phone.
Yep, it sure is. The other thing about this, though, is that rumor's been walked back now.
Yep.
And now we have what I personally think is a much more credible rumor.
Yeah.
Called the iPhone 5e, except for the 5 part.
No, you know what? I'm hanging with the 5e. I think that's reasonable. I think that Apple's got a lot.
You think?
Yeah, I think Apple's got a lot staked on marketing saying iPhone 6 now with bigger screen.
Maybe.
So I think that they can safely say, hey, this is the 5, but it's an expanded version of the 5. It's an extended version of the 5.
Yeah, like a 5S Plus.
Like a 5S Plus, but that implies a larger screen size.
Well, yeah, right. They can't call it that.
So, but yes, I'm okay with the 5e name. What the hell else are you going to call it?
Yeah, maybe. The specs we like. They're essentially, it is an iPhone 5S with added Apple Pay.
Is it a 5S? It's a 6, isn't it?
Well, this is the thing. Of course, these are rumors, so they never can be nailed down.
Yeah.
Some rumors say it will keep the 5S form factor because that's kind of the purpose. It's sort of like jazzing up the 5S to make it seem newer, but it's actually 2-year-old technology with added Apple Pay, with added support for voice over LTE, but essentially looks like an iPhone 5S. And then others say, oh no, it'll be made to look like an iPhone 6, like a 4-inch iPhone 6, and it'll have those things. But it will, in fact, the guts will be an iPhone 5S. Okay, sure. We'll go along with that. It could be any of these things. It could be none of these things, but at least it makes sense. At least it makes sense now.
Yeah, I have never seen Apple deciding to make the smaller form factor an equivalent phone to the 6 Plus.
Yeah, that's not that.
And the 6S Plus or the 6S. I just don't.
That's never going to happen. Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen.
One of Apple's guiding principles is they really don't look back a whole lot. They look forward mostly. When this rumor first appeared, it came out of a Chinese presentation from Foxconn, and they were talking about the roadmap going down, and they called it the iPhone 7C.
Actually, that's Chinatel, I think, something. It's one of the telecoms.
Yeah, China Mobile or somebody like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it was originally called the 7C. Now that's much more forward-looking, and that sounds a little more like something Apple might actually do, but it just keeps molding and shifting and changing. And the fact that is happening, this is part of our continuing education series on how to read between the lines and rumors. The fact that it keeps changing and not getting nailed down means that this is speculation. Nobody actually has seen one of these things. So could it exist? Yes. But is it mostly an educated guess based on pundits who would really like to see a very cheap iPhone? Yes.
Initially, I saw the rumored specs this week and said, yes, this is exactly right. I buy this. My concern is I've got a little confirmation bias going on because this is what makes sense to me.
Right.
But the thing is, this makes sense for the Apple ecosystem. I find it hard to believe that Apple's sustaining the sales numbers with the death of subsidized phones that they had before and a couple of other factors. And I do think that a lower end phone, other than just the 6s and 6 Pluses that are still lurking in the supply chain, I think could do them some good. Is it going to be a all hail the iPhone 5e, this is the best Apple product ever? No, but it's not intended to be that way. But nor is it a low-end Android phone.
Yeah. But on the other hand, Tim Cook himself has pointed out that something like 70% of iPhone owners haven't upgraded yet.
Something to that effect, yeah. It was a startling number.
Yeah. That number will have gone down a bit over Christmas because he mentioned it before then. But it's still going to be a very high number, at least half, probably much more. Mm-hmm. And so if there is something something that they can do to help upgraders, jump ship from wherever they are. Yes, a lot of people are still locked in contracts and they're not going to upgrade, but there's a lot of people who aren't. They've got their old phone. They're just still using it because they like it. Although Apple Pay isn't going to be a huge selling point yet, that's going to become more and more useful as time goes on. I think this year, 2016, is becoming the year of USB-C and HomeKit, but I'm hoping that the next couple of years are going to be the mainstreaming of Apple Pay. And all the others, Google Pay and Android Pay and Samsung Pay.
Well, as we've spoken before, it comes to a good time in the U.S. regulatory scheme of things because retailers are expected to replace their point-of-sale systems for credit cards this year.
I just literally got a note from my U.S. bank today that they are going to replace my card with one with a chip.
Yeah.
So yeah, the EMV cards, as they're called, are coming. Everybody's going to be making this transition pretty soon.
It's supposed to be 80% implementation by the end of this year.
So is the iPhone 5e, does it exist? No, but might it? Yes, it might. It certainly at least is something that Apple should be considering and probably is considering. But we don't believe in anything until we see a part leak that makes sense. So yeah, somebody show me a prototype. All right, then maybe. I want to come back to Time Warner in a second, but jumping over to that, another rumor that has no parts that we've seen is the Apple Watch 2, and it's supposed to be coming in just a couple of months. Though now, just as we were starting to record this podcast, we've heard that they are walking that back. What did we say, March or April? No.
I'm not sure we're going to see parts. I think that the Apple Watch 2 could kind of sneak out with a new processor and it wouldn't need much else.
It's sort of like the way they're talking about revamping the 5S into this 5E. I could sort of see, hey, we've just got better parts that we could use in the Apple Watch as it is, but I really don't expect them to come out and say, oh yeah, we changed the whole design. Here's a completely different product.
The rumor is not what's been highlighted elsewhere as, there's an Apple Watch 2. Well, that's inevitable.
Yeah, someday.
The issue is the release date. I'm not convinced it's this year. I mean, an Apple Watch 2 is going to happen. Let's be frank. If they've captured 50% of the wearables market in a year.
Yeah, and they have.
An Apple Watch 2 is going to happen.
Yeah. But most people haven't even experienced, experienced, not owned, experienced the Apple Watch 1. So unless there is some stunning feature that would make everybody go, oh, well, now I have to have it, I just don't see this happening right anytime soon.
Well, let's talk about the iPad versus the Apple Watch. Mm-hmm. The iPad 1, there was half the number of iPad 1s that there are iPads 2, and half the number of iPad 2s that there are of 3, and half the number of iPad 3s that there were of 4. So there's a doubling in the amount of units each generation.
Yeah.
I see no reason to believe that's not going to be the same with the Apple Watch. But I think that in fabricating the Apple Watch in the first place, I don't think they thought about a 2-year mobile cycle. I think they're thinking more 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah, exactly. The conversations I've had with Apple engineers, of course, they can't be specific, but they sort of lead me down that path as well. The other thing is that Apple has announced new watches before. There's the Apple Watch Hermes. It's not really a new watch. It's a new partnership and a new band. But they may do something like that. There are also other ways that they could do this.
Yeah.
For example, I'm just pulling this out of the thin air, but a titanium watch. Well, is that a new watch or is it the same watch with a new case?
It wouldn't surprise me if they started doing something with the mezzanine port.
Yeah, that could be. The other thing that I can't figure out about this rumor is that it was originally supposed to launch in March or April. Take your mind back a year to the debut of the Apple Watch, period, back in April. And what a rolling disaster that was. It's astounding this product has done as well as it has after that awful launch. I mean, it was just, and I understand some of the back reasons why that happened, but everybody was all hyped up and then nobody could get one until late June, early July. Oh no. I think if I was working at Apple, I'd be saying, no, the spring has bad juju. We need to move away from spring anything.
I think some of that is self-inflicted, and I think some of that is on purpose. I think
a lot of it was self-inflicted.
I think if Apple can say, you can't buy this anywhere because they're all sold out.
Yeah, all 5 of them.
I think that generates a hype for the product, and I think that generates an awful lot of press coverage for the product. So.
I think they wasted zillions in the hype that they did do. All these fashion shows and all the special parties and, the rich fofo places, and then nothing.
On the other hand, I don't think that's the case. I think that the hype machine worked just fine so people can say, I really want one of these for Christmas.
Well, this is the thing. Why wouldn't you? I mean, Apple even moved the iPad from spring to October. and they have very good reasons for doing so. The Apple Watch is a Christmas present.
Yeah.
Why in the world would you not debut a new one in the fall? There's just no reason. Hey, I'm hitting you with the new iPhone, with a new iPad, with a new watch. Boom, Wall Street.
Well, William is taking the lead on our Apple history product.
Yeah.
And we're going to find that historically Apple has spread out their releases over the entire calendar year. This fall Omni release thing is a relatively new thing that Apple has done.
Well, it's not, I mean, they do still release things in early summer.
They do.
But that's, June, around the Worldwide Developers Conference, of course.
Mostly software.
Well, yes, mostly software, occasionally Pro products. I'm fully expecting a new Mac Pro this year because I also believe in the Great Pumpkin.
Yeah, but we said that last year.
I did say that. Every year I'm going to be out in that pumpkin patch, man, waiting for the new Mac Pro to rise. And maybe we're going to be there is some talk about it, getting a new refreshed line of MacBooks. The Retina MacBook, maybe the MacBook Air, maybe the MacBook Pro. So those things make sense around WWDC. And of course, we know for a fact that we're going to be getting an update on the next version of OS 10 and on iOS 10 or whatever they decide to call it. So there's stuff that is going to be announced around then. But the Christmas present stuff should be released in the fall. Just my opinion there, but yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. The most hype you could possibly do is to have the Apple Watch 2 come out in September or October,
But that's exactly what they did with the new version of the Watch OS.
Yeah.
They shipped the hardware and said, okay, this is the watch.
Yeah.
And look at all these new features you've got on Watch OS 2 just in time for Christmas.
Yeah.
So this is planned from the get-go.
And that plus the discounting that happened over Christmas really sold that watch.
Oh, I know. Oh, my God.
We're expecting, I don't know if Apple's going to reveal specific numbers because they rarely do.
They won't.
But reports from retailers are pretty conclusive. They sold a ton of Apple Watches. The people who carried them sold a lot of them.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty irresistible combination. And of course, we're expecting kind of Apple Watch OS 3 same time next year. So there is if that was backed up with new hardware or maybe another year down the road, if that was backed up with new hardware, because by then the analysts will be crawling up the trees for a new one, I think that would just explode.
Yeah.
Last but not least, on the rumor front, there were several reports that Apple is, quote, keeping an eye on, unquote, Time Warner, because it's apparently a great target for a takeover now, which I agree with that part. And that the thought was Apple could just buy Time Warner and they would own a whole bunch of properties, which would be beneficial to them where they want to take Apple TV, allegedly. But you see how many allegedlys this is built on?
Yeah, I didn't buy this from the get-go. Yes, it would give them content, it would give them content studios, but Apple's never shown any interest in original drama. They've had the money to do it for a decade, and they've had the venue for distribution for a decade. So why all of a sudden now?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I don't think this one is just flawed.
I don't think so either. I think this is just deeply flawed. It's only because I think this rumor came around because Google's doing it and Amazon's doing it and Yahoo's doing it. So why don't you jump off a bridge as well, Apple? And my prediction, although hats off to Amazon, they just won 2 Golden Globes for Mozart in the Jungle. Good for them. But I think most of the shows that we see from these non-traditional television content producers are going to be unsuccessful, or at least not as successful as one hoped.
I don't know about that. I think that content distribution from big companies is more open than it's been. They don't have to negotiate with the broadcast network anymore.
I mean, from a program producer's point of view, this is the golden age because now they have, instead of just networks, now there's cable channels and now there's also web companies.
Sesame Street's moved to HBO. For the first time in 30 years, they have a functional budget.
Yeah, but there has been some complaints, actually, about the lack of accessibility.
Well, that's crap because the shows are going to be on PBS anyway, and they're not taking the broadcast licenses away from PBS.
No.
So if people are complaining that this is now an educational gap kind of thing, that only the rich can afford HBO, that's a load of baloney.
Well, no, but it's more a concern that this show's got to make its money back somewhere.
Content isn't free. We had a big discussion about this on the forum about web ads, but the thing is Sesame Street and the Children's Television Network has been operating on a shoestring budget since I was a child.
Yeah.
And now they have a budget. And you know what? Good for them. I have absolutely zero issue with this. And HBO is doing the right thing. HBO, Yes, they're airing the episodes first on HBO. Fine. That's their right. But they're also giving it to PBS.
Yeah. Well, as long as that's going on, then I certainly have no objection either. And I have no ground to talk about this because giving Doctor Who money was the best thing that ever happened to Doctor Who.
The Sesame Street question, we'll go back to Time Warner in a minute. But the Sesame Street question is this: do you want more of it or do you want less of it?
Yeah.
If you want less of it, then let it sit with CTW and let them be funded by PBS.
Yeah.
If you want more of it, then this is perfect. And I don't see how you can argue that you want less Sesame Street.
They're not going to turn it into an HBO program. Fine. If they're going to keep it in the spirit that it is with the original vision, then you're right. There's nothing to be a ball bent out of shape.
So I think we're going to see more of that, not less of that.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see more of, so-and-so by Amazon and so-and-so by Yahoo. And I just don't think Apple wants any part of that.
Right. And besides, they've already got a great idea, and that is that the future of TV is apps. Well, you know what? They have absolutely no objection to apps from Amazon, the Amazon channel with all your favorite Amazon shows on it.
Yeah.
There's no objection whatsoever to HBO. There's no objection whatsoever to Google, for that matter. Bring those TV shows over here. We'll show them. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think you're exactly right. I don't think Apple wants to get into the TV production end of it. Even if they were to take a very hands-off approach, you just go and make the show and we'll buy it. It's just nothing that Apple's ever done before. Now, of course, that doesn't rule out anything, but it seems unlikely. So we're sort of thumbs down on all these rumors.
Well, no, we're completely on board with the 5E.
Yeah, we could be on board with the 5E.
We know an Apple Watch 2 is coming, but we don't agree with the time frame.
Yeah.
And the only one we're really thumbs down on is the Time Warner buy.
Right. Well, that one just seems, that Apple would buy it. We've heard those kinds of rumors so many times that Apple is about to buy so-and-so. And when they do buy something, it's never who you expect. I mean, nobody saw Beats coming at all. And maybe that'll turn out to be a stupid decision. I have a feeling no, but it'll take a while to earn its money back. Of course, I could say the same thing about Top Gear show that Amazon's.
As far as earning the money back from Beats, it really depends on how you consider what they've done with Apple Music.
Yes, and what they've done with Beats, with the headphones. The numbers on how many headphones are sold each year from that company is staggering.
Yes.
Anyway, so much for rumors. Let's move on to facts. Fact, iPhone 6S is the best smartphone around. And I don't just say that as an opinion. I've backed it up with test scores. Well, I should say a different site has backed it up with test scores, and a very highly respected site. This is Antutu, not Anantech. Antutu has tested most of the flagship phones that are out right now. And for the first time ever, they were able to test the iPhone alongside all the Android models because they finally developed a benchmark that worked on cross-platforms. Guess who won by 50% or more? It's the iPhone.
Yeah. But who cares?
Well, those nerds.
Right. I mean, that's the point, is you're really not going to start slamming your iPhone into a BOINC array and start doing massively parallel calculations from the SETI project.
No, that's true.
That's not what the mobile processors are geared for.
But I'll tell you exactly who this is aimed at, squarely, and why I predict Apple will be trumpeting this all over the place pretty soon, is because it is vitally important to people who are using Android now and would otherwise switch, except that they have this perception that 8 cores and 4 gigabytes of RAM is better than 2 cores and 2 gigabytes of RAM, even though now we can say, nope, wrong.
Here's the thing. This is going to sound terrible, but I'm going to say it anyway. We don't want that kind of people over here.
Well, that's true. But Apple sees, like it or not, its biggest path of growth besides China as switchers. And in certain markets like the United States, they are correct. Upgraders and switchers are the two big markets they need to chase.
Yeah.
This sort of thing at least gets people interested in, well, now, how do they do that? How is it that their phone is that much better? To give you some idea, if you haven't seen the chart, the iPhone 6S and 6S Plus scored 132,620 on a scale of what? I don't know. But the next one down was 92,746. So it's a huge difference. That's a 41% difference.
This is a PR victory, and I'm thrilled that Apple's got their PR victory here, but it is utterly meaningless.
No, it's not entirely meaningless. What we've been telling people for years is true. This thing performs really well because the hardware and software are integrated.
How often are you waiting on the phone, and how often are you waiting on the internet?
Well, this is the thing. I've been on some Android phones. I haven't owned them, but I've used them. And sometimes there's that weird pause with everything. And I keep wondering why. I've even seen it with the Galaxy Note 5, which I otherwise think is a terrific product. But there's just this weird, treacliness with the interactions. And I just don't see it on the iPhone 6S. So, yeah, I think to some people this will make a difference. It will at least cause them to reassess their position and maybe go check one out in person instead of just reading on the internet.
This will make a difference to the two.
Yeah, probably.
If you don't know what I'm talking about, out of 200 Mac users, out of 1,000 Apple Store customers we spoke with, 2 of them were considered OS X support professionals.
Right.
And in this case, when I say the 2, that's who I'm talking about. This is going to appeal to the 1% of people that visit MacNN Tech and who look at Ars Technica for this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And where the bar graphs where it's X% faster than this model, but X% slower than this model, and OpenGL performance versus Metal performance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's who's going to make a difference. It's not going to make a difference to the Vanity Fair ad readers.
Yeah. See, Apple will just take this and say the fastest smartphone you can buy.
Sure. And like I said, it's a PR victory.
Yeah.
But as far as day-to-day use, no, this makes very little difference.
Perhaps so, but I think this psychologically it does something. I mean, this whole thing was driving the PC market for years and years and years, that 4.0 gigahertz was better than 3.0 gigahertz no matter what else was going on.
But even then, it wasn't.
It wasn't. You're right. It wasn't. But the perception did make a difference, at least in terms of what people were willing to buy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it did. And like I said, this is a PR victory.
Yeah. There's 2 things that Apple users have always said in their endless attempts to convert their Android relatives. And that is, well, it's very fast and smooth and good, and it just works. That's one thing. And then the other thing is that even though it's much more locked down than, say, Android is, that you get a better experience overall. Android people never believe us. These things will maybe help them go, oh, wait a minute, that score is way bigger, not a little bigger, way bigger than these other scores. Maybe they're not talking crap.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting if that same benchmark could be used to determine battery life. Because this is the other thing I've always said, is if iPhone users think the battery dies quick, imagine an 8-core Android phone with 4 gigabytes of RAM burning it up. I'd be very interested to see battery scores. Let's just put it that way. Okay. Moving on, let's talk about something for a moment that makes us all want to shoot ourselves in the head, and that is irresponsible parenting. It's getting worse, and although we're going to be focusing on one particular aspect of it, it is getting worse. There's been a whole slew of articles I've noticed on Facebook about parents need to grow up and society needs to mature a bit, particularly as we go into the election year for obvious reasons. But let's focus on one particular part. This is a story we've done over and over and over again.
And we've gone a long time without having to do this story, and I thought this was done.
Yeah, no. Stupid will find a way, Mike. Stupid will always find a way. So what we're talking about in particular is routinely, and usually out of a British tabloid for some reason, we got yet another story about a kid who racked up, either accidentally or not, an enormous charge, about $5,200 US, in-app purchases. In this case, the specific game was called Jurassic World, and like a lot of other games, it is aimed at a very young audience. Jurassic World has a rating of 4 and up, so 4 years old and up. And it features in-app purchases, and a lot of people have said maybe that combination's not a good idea. We'll talk about that in a minute. But before that, so the kid somehow got his father's password. We don't really actually know how, but he did. And so he racked up a huge bill, and allegedly 7 years old did not understand that he was using real money. Okay, that's a little less believable, but fine. Let's go forward with it. What I don't understand is how the father is off the hook on this. That's the part I don't understand. Or the mother, the family, generally. Why are they not on the hook for this? I don't have kids, but I wouldn't let them watch porno movies. And I know how to prevent them from doing so.
I do have kids, and even if a child has your password, there's still ways to prevent the in-app purchase from happening in the first place.
Yeah, at least 4.
There's at least 4 ways. Some of them are defeatable with the password, yes. But I'm just flabbergasted by this. I have 2 children beating on their iPads, and yet somehow they've managed to not make any in-app purchases.
Yeah. What are the ages of your kids, by the way?
I've secured the device. One of them is a very precocious Technology 5, who I have had battles about volume control with in the past, and he's always managed to circumvent them. But the thing is, Apple since iOS 5 has had ways to lock down in-app purchases.
Just turn them off outright, in fact.
Yeah. So I'm kind of at a loss on this, and I really don't care for how the guy handled this with Apple. He straight out lied to Apple to get his money refunded to him.
Yeah, right. Saying he needed them for Christmas presents.
And then he started waving around the stick of, I can't believe Apple allows this, which is utter crap.
Yeah.
And I talked about this in our forums, that we only have ourselves to blame on this, okay? We are the ones as consumers who decided that mobile apps needed to be free or $1.
Yeah.
If we did not decide that this is what we wanted, if we decided, oh yeah, $30 for a complete game, yeah, well, I'll play $30 on mobile for that. If we decided that, then we wouldn't have these situations where companies needed whales, meaning people that spend thousands and thousands of dollars on in-app purchases in-game.
Yes.
To stay afloat.
Kanye West, everybody's favorite person. Kanye West tweeted about how his two-year-old daughter was making in-app purchases to the point that he had felt that he needed to go onto Twitter to complain about it. Kanye, you're a genius, but you really should look in a mirror sometime.
Not even respectfully, he can bite me.
Yeah.
Because his wife's app is all about in-app purchases.
Well, oh, please, let's not mention her.
Okay, so, I mean, he can spew all he likes about the horror of in-app purchases, but how many millions of dollars has been made on that damn Kardashian game?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's one of the reasons they're so rich.
I don't even want to hear him flap his lip about it.
But never mind the super rich people to whom $5,600 is, tip money. Let's forget about them for a minute. Let's talk about normal parents. You have children. You're using your iPad as a babysitter the way my parents used television as a babysitter.
Yeah.
But an iPad will offer your kids the opportunity to spend money, to spend real money.
Yeah. Unless you as a parent take control of the situation. Here's the thing. Before in-app purchases were well regulated, I just didn't allow the iPads to connect to the internet.
Mm-hmm. That's one way.
Okay. Guaranteed no in-app purchases are happening that way. And then more and more in-app purchase controls rolled out. So I said, okay, some of their apps like having connection to the internet so it can load their, the fire truck video or whatnot. So as time went on, I unlocked more and more and more capabilities of the iPad. But Apple says all over their pages about this, do not share your password with your children.
Now, admittedly, the story about this particular one is that the kid memorized the password from watching the parent use it. I have my doubts about this, but fine. It is only 4 digits or so it's certainly possible.
I'm reasonably certain he gave it up willingly. I don't think that this is...
Well, what I've seen too often happen is a kid will be nagging to buy something and it's only $1.99 or something. So the parent will say, all right, fine. My password is this, but only for that.
Yeah, that's bad. That, for lack of a better term, that's bad operational security.
Yeah.
It's...
to say the least.
Yes, I understand that you and I were plunked in front of the television to some extent as a babysitter. I get that. But the in-app purchases, we're watching G.I. Joe cartoons where we'd actually have to go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no immediate gratification on this. There's nothing that's going to happen on this that right then, unless we're calling Ronco Records for the Hit Tracks album in 1978.
Another benefit of not having children, I tell you.
Well, let me unwrath a little bit here because this is just something that we just keep having to report on.
Mm-hmm.
And this is 100% children's surveillance and making sure your device is properly secured. As you get it, your device is properly secured. So if you're undoing this security by giving your kid your password, which you shouldn't do, or you're undoing it by saying, I don't want to have to wait in between purchases and put in my so challenging password for each in-app purchase that I want to do. Consider the use of your device. If you need to prevent your children from getting on the internet, then don't activate the Wi-Fi, and that'll cut off everything at its head.
Yep.
And again, there are requiring passwords for each purchase. There are utter denial of purchases on this machine. There's ways to do that. There are so many things that Apple gives you the ability to do on iOS to prevent this kind of thing from happening.
Yeah.
And I know I'm a little bit of a hard ass sometimes, but if I was Apple in my case, it would be your kid stole your password. Why should we give you a damn cent?
Yeah, exactly.
But they didn't, and I'm a little bit concerned about that. There is such a thing as precedent, and now I'm concerned that the stupid user precedent is set.
Well, yeah, I agree with you, but I will say this. I think there is some where there's some age, it's not 7, evidently, because this case involved a 7-year-old, but at some point, I don't know if it's 8 or 9 or 10, but somewhere along the line, Apple is going to say, no, this kid knows exactly what he did.
Oh, this kid knew exactly what he did anyway. My 5-year-old, he's good at some things, not good at other things, but he knows damn well that money is something you exchange for another object, and you have a finite supply of it.
Right.
He knows perfectly well what money is for and what it does.
And, one thing we haven't mentioned so far is that when you make an in-app purchase, there is a dialog box that comes up that confirms it.
Yeah, are you sure you want to spend $60 on 10,000 Smurf berries? Right.
That's right.
And every time the kid made a purchase, it said something like this. Every time, and the kid blew through the dialog box every time.
That's right. And again, there's just not really a good deal of parental supervision going on. So if you're a parent, at the very minimum, because I understand there's different levels of kids, right? So some kids do need to be on the internet for legitimate reasons.
Yeah.
Very young children probably don't.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
And so you can turn off Wi-Fi and lock it out so that they can't get on it. At least not at your house, anyway. Let them go on somebody else's iPad.
Yeah, you know what? If you're an adult and you come to my house, you better have a damn good reason to get on my Wi-Fi too. So It's not just my kids I'm nasty to about that.
Yeah, but then at a certain age, they need it for school or whatever, and so fine. But then in-app purchases can be turned off. The warnings can be set. You can receive notifications when somebody makes an in-app purchase, so you will know right away. I don't know if we mentioned this earlier, but every 24 hours, the iTunes Store sends you a receipt. So the parent was doing some ignoring here as well.
Yeah, I'm not really certain how that went down. I guess all these purchases happened over 8 days. That's still an awful lot of receipts.
Yeah, that's at least 8 receipts that he would have gotten, and they would have been your receipt for $300 worth of or whatever. Wow. So, yeah, I would have gotten on that right away. I check my bank balance all the time. So... and I don't even have children.
I will give him 2 or 3 days of this.
Yeah.
2 or 3 days I can understand, because the App Store purchases don't always spin through to your bank account and say Apple App Store or whatever application right away. It can take sometimes a day or 2 or 3 to get in the system.
Sure.
So I will give him 3 days on the outside, given that he's a complete frickin' dunderhead. But that's all 8 days.
Yeah, 8 days of this. And then on top of that, as we mentioned earlier, he told Apple that he needed that money back because he had to buy Christmas presents for the family. And then he told the Daily Mail that he'd already bought the Christmas presents, so it didn't affect Christmas.
Which is a load crap anyway, because it was on his business's credit card.
Well, that's the other.
And he says he only discovered it after he tried to make a purchase for his business.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of shenanigans going on here. And I'm sorry. Maybe I had some concern about this back in iOS 5 when the protections weren't quite so militant. And we've talked about this on this podcast.
Yeah.
But not with iOS 9 or even 8 or even 7.
Yeah.
I have absolutely zero remorse for this situation.
On top of that, one last thing. I do understand that there is one drawback to the iPad, and that is that it cannot have separate accounts on a single iPad. Apple's solution is, well, buy another iPad, which is kind of genius. But anyway, there is another way to prevent this, and that is don't tie your credit card to the iTunes account. You don't have to. That's certainly not a business credit card. Hello.
Yeah, just fund it with gift cards.
Yeah, just fund it with gift cards, because they will run out and then there won't be any money to spend.
And it's say nothing of there's constantly 20% off sales going on, it seems, to get $100 of credit for $80 or whatnot.
Right. So you actually can spend less money, even abusively, by you taking advantage of gift card sales. So yeah, bottom line here is I'm afraid that both the parents and non-parents on this staff are pretty unsympathetic when your child runs up $5,000 worth of purchases.
What I'm thinking about right now is with the polling we did.
Yeah.
How many people are using this as an appliance, just to call it an internet appliance for the first time ever, a functional internet appliance. It's not a web TV. and the education level, I'm concerned, has slipped significantly in the last 10 years.
Well, you can ask any college professor about that and they'll tell you the same thing. But you're right. There is a little bit more that could be done to explain to parents, okay, you have an iPad. Here's how you lock it down.
Oh, no, I completely disagree. When you go through your initial setup, it talks about all of this. And then it says, do you want this lesson again? Go to this web link.
Oh,
so I completely disagree that Apple could do more to educate users on this. I think that they have fulfilled everything that they need to do to educate users sufficiently. And you have only yourself to blame if your kid chews through $6,000 of in-app purchases.
Well, yeah, I didn't say Apple. I was saying there was more that could be done generally. Like, remember public service announcements that said useful things? Those were the days. I'm old.
You know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, with the time that I spent standing in front of the damn Apple store, I guarantee you that on that screen, the screens around the store, that the scroll would say, secure your device against unauthorized in-app purchases by doing this.
Yeah.
And it would keep on coming through. So no, there's nothing else that Apple should be doing about this. They have done everything they should be doing. And the next class action suit that comes up, I will openly mock.
We're throwing objective journalism out the window. And why?
Well, no, you know what? I'll report it objectively, and then the very next article will be, this guy is a complete and utter tool. That would be the editorial.
Don't hold back, Mike. Tell him what you really think.
That's what I love about the podcast, because all week long I grit my teeth.
Yeah.
All week long I say, and then the court filing said this, and Apple said this, but in my head I'm going, oh my God, how dumb is this?
Yeah. Last but not least, before we leave it, is we made this point briefly before, but I just want to reiterate it again. The reason why these apps are freemium and can have criminal amounts of in-app purchases, and for criminal amounts, is you. Look in the mirror. Our society collectively decided that apps for iPads and iPhones should be at most $2, and that's it, but preferably free. So if you're buying a freemium game for your kids, there's even a section before you download it on the iOS App Store page that will tell you exactly what in-app purchases are offered. So again, if you're really concerned about this, don't buy those.
Well, you can't avoid it.
There are games that make a point of no in-app purchases. We reviewed a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, we actually frequently do. This does open up a larger conversation of what is internet content worth. And we in quotes, we decided, you know what my first purchase on the App Store was? It was Bejeweled. You know how much it cost me?
$1?
No, $10.
Ooh.
I paid $10 for Bejeweled because they were still shaking out what things were going to cost.
Oh, right. Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't think... maybe it's just me since I'm so wealthy, but when I see a really highly rated, really good app that seems like it's around $5, I don't even think about it. That's a coffee. If I can get an app for $5 that does the job and doesn't have ads or doesn't have in-app purchases, to me, that's a bargain.
Yeah, the freemium model that modern customers demand forces developers to rely on whales. It forces developers to rely on people who will happily spend hundreds and thousands of dollars on in-app purchases to play the game the way they want to play it.
Yeah.
And people can say, well, it should be limited to this amount. Well, then kiss freemium goodbye. If you limit the whales to $50, then no one is going to develop these products anymore.
Yes. Yeah, we're going to get a letter from Kanye West saying that we called him fat.
Oh, yeah. Here we go with Kanye and his wife again.
The whale term does not refer to your physical size, Mr. West.
All week. Try the whale.
Speaking of things that concern us, let's say, we've just done a story about a new law proposal, a legislative proposal in New York State that would mandate backdoors in smartphones. Actually, just prior to this story coming out, we also did an editorial about encryption generally. And this is not an area, incidentally, where Android is hugely different than Apple on this point. But for some reason, Apple's the public leader on this. At last night's Republican debate, they said, well, but Tim Cook wants to lock the phone. What are you going to do about terrorism and Tim Cook? Not terrorism in Google, not terrorism in Microsoft. Tim Cook, just that one guy, because he hand encrypts each one of these phones. And if you read the editorial, you know our position. A backdoor is a backdoor. The end. Well, actually, no, not the end. That's bad enough. A backdoor means that if one exists, that means everybody can use it at some point. Criminals can use it, hackers can use it, virus writers can use it, and the government can use it. The other point is this is not a debatable point from a constitutionalist point of view. It is actually there in the document that we have a right to protection from unreasonable search, which mass surveillance and mass collection of data is. And we also have it right there in the document that we have a right to be secure in our persons and papers. You don't have to be an activist judge to interpret that as your data. Your data.
Well, that has been interpreted in that fashion. There are
Right.
many precedents that point in that direction. The New York case is troubling in a couple of different ways. It's so vague in what exactly they're looking for. But what's certain in the document, what's certain in the court filing, is that they want to fine Apple $2,500 for each device that they ship that doesn't have this backdoor. So I have a question. If somebody makes a secure communications app, is Apple somehow liable for this?
Yeah, that's just the start of it. Do you really think, well, first, Apple would just take it to court, of course, but if they ultimately lost, they would just pull out of New York. And what do you suppose that would do? Because they are not going to put a backdoor in this thing.
No, I don't think so either. I think that this is going to I think that this is an election issue more than anything else.
Yeah.
I think, like we said in the editorial, I think that politicians can point to the judge saying, oh my God, are you stupid?
Right. Well, this is the other thing is hopefully any judge that sees this would go, are you mad? Look at the Constitution. I mean, yes, we've already trod all over the Constitution, and that's another discussion for another day. But this part, I think, will stand up to legal scrutiny for a start. I think the law on its face is unconstitutional because, as you mentioned, it's vague, but also it has these oddball penalties. One thing that is missing out of these conversations that I've brought up a few times, but I haven't brought up on the podcast, is this. The encryption that Apple uses on their iPhones, and they now optionally offer it on the Macs during setup, they don't have the key, so they cannot easily decrypt it. That does not mean it is undecryptable. Most encryptions, and I think Apple uses an industry standard AES 256, if I'm not mistaken.
No, I don't think so. I think it's 4096.
Is it?
I think so.
Either way, given time and physical possession of the device, you probably can break this. It's just a matter of time, and of course that would take 4096 would take a long time. So it's not law enforcement has special tools already designed for breaking encryption. So this is not a case of it's impossible. It's impossible only in the sense that Apple doesn't have the key and cannot turn it around quickly.
You want this guy's data, get a warrant and get the email.
Right.
You want who this guy is called, get a warrant and give it to AT&T.
Yeah.
It's that simple. This isn't about the cops being able to flip a switch and be able to rummage through somebody's phone.
Right.
And that's what they want. And that's what this case is about. What the feds want is the ability for not even a warrant. They just want to rifle through the phone.
Well, and as we heard last night, if you listened to the Republican debate, some of the candidates there actually said, nope, let's go back to the NSA dragnetting everybody all the time. Again, this is election year and playing on fear and world events being unsteady as they are. I understand how this plays into some people's concerns, but I think Tim Cook has made a good case, but not even strong enough, even from him, is that you're making a terrible, terrible mistake if you're not pro-encryption.
Yeah, the September 11th attacks took 3 years to orchestrate. 3 years.
Yeah.
The Paris attacks took 187 days. Mm-hmm. And at no point was encryption used in the Paris attacks.
Yeah.
At no point. So get good at law enforcement.
Thank you for saying that. That's exactly it. How did we catch people before? We did, A number of terrorist attacks have been thwarted. We just had one up here in Canada. One here in Victoria, where I am right now, that was thwarted by good old-fashioned police work.
There's a lot of this that bugs me. And believe it or not, all you guys on the left side of the fence, this goes back to the Clinton era for two different things. This goes back to the Clinton era for the removal of human intelligence.
Yep.
And it goes back to the Clinton era for the beginning of the echelon email filtering program.
Yep.
So before you start saying that this is a Republican issue, it's not.
No.
This is a governmental issue of the government's the world around.
Yeah.
This is an important issue.
We understand, believe me, we understand that from the position of law enforcement, anything that makes their job easier, particularly in terms of prevention, is to them a great idea. The problem is that isn't how the Constitution works. It's not a tool to make their job easier. It's a tool, in fact, to make their job much harder, because our entire justice system is founded on the idea that people are innocent until proven guilty, which means they have to do something first. We're not, and we shouldn't become, what was that terrible Tom Cruise movie, Vanilla Sky?
Well, that was a terrible Tom Cruise movie, but the one you're talking about is Minority Report.
Minority Report, that's the one.
Vanilla Sky.
Well, I think I got confused because those guys out in Oregon are Vanilla ISIS, but
Oh, jeez.
Let's not even bring them up.
Y'all Al-Qaeda?
As far as I can tell, they're not using Macs. We're not talking about them.
Well, all I'm going to say about those guys is cut off the supply of snacks and electricity and water, and this will be over.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
All I'm going to say is, who was it? I just heard about it today. Somebody sent them a 55-gallon drum of lube.
Lube. Yeah, the guy from Cards Against Humanity.
Oh, that's right. Okay, enough said. Please go back and read our editorial on encryption and why we are in favor of it. With any movement that you make that preserves liberty or freedom generally, there's a cost to be paid. Ben Franklin said that eternal vigilance is the cost of liberty, and there have been many other costs associated with that. This is one of those, and as a society, we need to figure out what the acceptable price is.
Let's not pull any punches here. Charles is left of center.
Well, generally, although I can actually be quite conservative and even libertarian on some issues. It depends on the issue.
And I am on the average right of center with the same liberalism on the other side periodically. I'm more of the bomb the site from orbit. It's the only way to be sure kind of guy. Charles is not, but we're in agreement on this. We are in agreement that the encryption issue, this should have already been solved, should have been the end of the story.
Yeah.
But, let's see how many more freedoms we're going to give up.
Yeah. Just the argument about the back doors alone should have ended this, but there are several others. And again, falling back to the Constitution is my favorite way of reaching out to people who are right of me on this issue. And that is, look, the more constitutionalist you are, the more this should concern you. Anyway, if you're in New York, if you're listening to this podcast, would you please get in touch with your legislature? We'd appreciate it. All right, thanks. Moving on. RIP IAD. Ooh, yeah. Didn't see that one coming, man.
Yeah, that's developed quickly.
Just a couple of days ago, prior to this podcast recording, we ran a story about, Apple's going to maybe move out of the, they're going to stop being the middleman and just let IAD go on its own. And now today we got, nope, the whole thing's being shut down and just handed over to the publishers and they can just do whatever they want with it. But Apple is bugged out. That's what they've done. Like they used to say in MASH, bug out.
Well, it's an interesting decision to me because Apple News really hasn't gotten good momentum going yet. It's a promising product. I think it's got a bright future still.
Yeah, I use it all the time. I love it.
I don't think this is going to get iWeb to death or anything like that.
No.
And IAD, properly executed, would go hand in hand with it.
Well, and this is sort of the thing. We should have seen this coming because Apple did set up a different system for the news app than they had they didn't just say, nope, it all goes under IAD. They went, no, here's the way we're going to do it. And so it was something different.
That's true. That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
So I think the tea leaves were there and we just didn't notice them. But just the way they've sort of completely abandoned it. And I want to stress this for a second. We're not talking about, again, this is sort of the 5C story all over again. The iPhone 5C was way more successful than people give it credit for. It was by no means a failure. It made Apple billions. But the IAD was always perceived as not even close. But in fact, let me give you the totals.
Oh, I know. The totals are impressive.
The totals in percentage of the mobile advertising market. IAD was in third place with 5%. Google, who everybody thinks owns the world in terms of mobile advertising, had 9.5%. You know who owns mobile advertising? Facebook, 38%.
And there's a whole bunch of ones and twos.
Yeah, there's a ton of ones and twos. None of you ever look at the ads on your phone, I know. But if you ever do, in the tiniest writing possible in the little corner, there's usually an icon or a sign or some sort of, with an IAD, you actually see the word IAD right in the little corner. And so there are many ad aggregators. Flurry, for example, who often provide us with statistics about trends in app use and all that sort of stuff, is one of them, right? So there's a million of these guys. And Google doesn't have anywhere near the share everybody thinks it does. And so IAD was actually a very viable competitor. They had about half as much of business as Google. It's just Facebook was crushing everyone. But I think the problem was that again, a bad launch. They really, really launched this terribly badly. To those of you who remember when IAD launched, it was for advertisers that were willing to spend $1 million or more. And it had to be, we'll create the ad, we'll work with you to make it work in such a way there isn't going to be any annoying sound effects or animations. They had all kinds of rules. And the other thing, this was the thing that really killed it, was the analytics were quite limited. Advertisers want to know literally everything about you, because that's Google's model. That's how they're trained now. They need to know. Facebook as well. I shouldn't exempt them. Advertisers want to know everything about what you're doing. How long you were on that app. Did you buy anything? How much did you pay for it? They want to know everything they can know.
Yeah.
And Apple wouldn't give it to them. This is also what's kind of stymied news, and this is also what's kind of stymied some of their other previous attempts at aggregating content. So yeah, it's an issue. But they just kept breaking down the barriers. They went from 1 million to 100,000 to 50,000, and then finally just, hey, everybody, we just want anyone to come advertise with us.
Yeah.
And eventually it became a great haven for app developers, right, who are certainly not even going to qualify for the $50,000 level. They're just, can I send you $20? So it was a terrible launch. I don't think Apple ever intended iAd to topple Google or Facebook, but I think they wanted to bring an alternative to those two for developers who didn't depend on spying on you, essentially. The other thing, I think, is that over time, particularly after Tim Cook took over, iAd was the weak spot in Apple's stance on privacy, security. We're not spying on you. Well, then how are you running an ad agency? I mean, Apple does collect data about usage and, all that kind of thing. They have to pass that on to the developers. That's the purpose of the ad, or at least the secondary purpose of the ad. So it just became increasingly not viable to say, well, we respect your privacy and we really don't want to know how you use our stuff. It's okay. Oh, wait, except for mobile advertising. It just wasn't working out. Bad marriage.
It remains to be seen exactly how much Apple will still continue to oversee what publishers crank into the system. I would like to think that there's still going to be some oversight for malware and just general practices, but I don't know if there are going to be or not.
Doesn't sound like it. Sounds like they're bugging out.
Doesn't sound like it.
Yeah, I would hate to see iAd ever become a source for malware, as has happened on the other side. Mm-hmm. But we'll see. iAd is pretty much done. And there's a good question. One of our commenters asked a great question, which was, iAd producer, is that going to keep working? And the answer is, we don't know. We'll all find out together. Yep. Anyway, RIP iAd. 6 years they were running that business.
Yeah, it's a long time. A lot longer than everyone thought.
Well, the other thing, I almost forgot to mention this. It took them half the time it took Google to get into the position where they are. Not bad. I mean, it was actually a fairly successful effort, just not really in line with the company's position, especially as it is now.
Yep.
Moving on. And as we often do on the MacNN podcast, we have our app of the week. And this week, as usual, it's William Gallagher, and he's going to let us know what it is that's caught his fancy this week. William, what have you got for app of the week?
Nothing simple, is it? I want to recommend Interact to you, a new contacts app from the maker of Drafts 4, and I'm going to recommend it to you. It's a big recommendation with a little but. What's good about Interact is that on the iPad, especially the iPad Pro, it displays your contacts in a grid instead of that regular long list we're familiar with on Apple's own contacts app. You can see whole chunks of people at once, and when you're creating groups, which is particularly easy to do in Interact. In fact, it's easier than Apple's contacts app. You can see everybody you need. I love it. It is a list on the iPhone, and I'm not so keen on that, though you can turn the phone to landscape and see a couple of entries at once. iPad, gorgeous. iPhone, okay. What's handy is that you can particularly easily take a group or just mark off in various individuals and then email or message them all at once right from within the Interact app. And what's great is the Contacts Scratchpad. Tap a button, up pops the panel, you just start typing Abraham Lincoln, 1600 Pennsylvania, or whatever it is, and Interact parses that. It recognizes this bit is a name, that's an address, this is a phone number. Everything it recognizes, it turns bold, so you can see straight away what it's grasped. If you're happy with that, tap a button or two, and you've added Abraham Lincoln to your contacts list. What's greater still is that you can do that from anywhere on iOS. Interact provides a share extension, which means in Mail, in Evernote, in any app you can think of, you can copy some contact details, tap a button, and Interact adds it to your contacts. What's not so good? Well, actually, for once, sorry, I'm going to ask you, I'd really like you to read my fuller review on MacNN macnn.com, because there are a fair few things to cover, but they're all really small and really fiddly. I think overall there is a problem that Interact is unnecessarily confusing. I mean, you get it, it just takes a little while, and you have things like there are a couple of cases where there are two controls next to each other that turn out to do really similar things, for example. It's all stuff you'll get. It's all stuff that you can be sure will evolve and will change. You will notice them, but you'll also notice the convenience, the power, actually the cleverness of Interact. So it is most certainly a recommended app of the week. Interact is on the App Store right now, and it's on sale with a launch price of $5.
Well, that about wraps it up for episode 47 of the MacNN podcast. We're on this long slog. We got another 3 weeks to get to episode 50. Oh, God. But I can't wait. We're going to have drinks and party favors and all kinds of things for episode 50. So that'll be fun. We're going to pull out all of our favorite sound effects and play them.
Looking forward to it.
It's kind of like a bad office party for episode 50.
Or a morning show gone terribly wrong.
Yeah. In the meantime, though, we'll continue to report on the news, and we'll have so much more to talk about next week. On behalf of the entire staff of MacNN, I'm the editor, Charles Martin. That's the managing editor, Mike Worthley, over there.
Oh, I'm supposed to say something. Yep.
yeah, that's fine. And on behalf of the entire staff, we appreciate your listening. And please tell a friend. We'd like to see the podcast get as high on the Apple iTunes charts as our ebook, MacNN Pointers, available for 99 cents, is on the iBook.
Oh, Lord. Here we go. I knew I shouldn't have authorized that project.
Well, more volumes are coming, too. So, yeah, look out.
Best-selling tech author Charles Martin.
Yeah. That's right. William and I are actually having a little bit of a tiff at the moment. I want to call the second volume MacNN Pointers 2 Electric Boogaloo.
How did I know you were going to do that?
And he doesn't know what that means.
He demurely deferred. Well, here's the deciding vote. No.
Damn it. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.